Ungimmicked. Another week, another episode, one more time that the whole crew comes together because today we have Alex Moreau, Connor McDonald, Matthew O'Neill, Sanjeev Vinod, my name's Gonçalo Souza, and let's get into it, boys. Woo! This week we are talking about presentation, performances, and spotlights. Sanjeev, tell us a little bit about this.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So, today we are going to be talking about magician-centric presentations. A magician-centric presentation is, I think, what a lot of magic is presented in today. I would go as far as to call it the default. And for the purposes of this discussion, how I'm defining a magician-centric presentation is actually a framework that I first encountered in the Jerks, where a magician-centric presentation is any presentation where the focus is on the magician. And if the focus is anywhere else, if the focus is on a story, if the focus is on a larger narrative, or even a spectator, then I would call it audience-centric magic instead. So that means that not just gambling demos or sleight of hand demos, but actually anything where the subtext or the punchline is something along the lines of, look what I can do, which is surprisingly a super majority of magic that we see, all that falls under the umbrella of a magician-centric presentation. And personally, to start right off with an opinion, I despise these presentations for a couple of reasons. The first is that it's very explicit, it's very shallow, and I'm a big fan of subtlety and depth because to me that's what provokes thought. If you've told the audience everything there is to say, then there's nothing left to think about. And second, I hate the subtext of a magician-centric presentation. Again, in the narrow way that I defined it, because to me it has its roots in the often cheap insecurity that drew so many of us to magic in the first place. Because when done in a certain way, as I see it done so often, it means, look at what I can do. Look at me, give me attention, clap for me. And I don't know, that's just such a low bar for I think what magic can accomplish as an art form. Mm-hmm. So my question that I pose to you all is there room for magician-centric presentations in magic, and should we make room for it? So in the first half of the discussion, I want to get all of your opinions on what constitutes a magician-centric presentation and what context it can and is already presented in. And I think we can also touch on juggling versus magic because I think there's a very interesting parallel there. And in the second half, I want to touch on how can it be presented tastefully if we choose that there's a place for it, what is its place, and how can it be improved. So that was a lot of words. I'll open it up to you boys. What constitutes a magician-centric presentation?
So let me get the ball rolling here. First of all, to answer one of your questions, yes, there is space for magician-centric presentations. There is a way to do it tastefully, in my opinion, but I think we'll get to that later. I want to open with one subsection of magic, arguably the most popular, especially in the last century, that I think is solely magician-centric, most stage magic. The kind of stage magic that is, you see the magician come out, you see the props, you see the assistant. Whatever the magician's going to do there, whatever music they have behind... Sorry?
Can you give us some example just to clarify? You don't have to name names or anything. I just want to make sure I understand what you mean.
So I'll give you an example. Sawing a woman in half.
Again, we're talking about presentation here, right? Not effect. So what presentation of that would you say
the
falls
presentation
under
is usually, oh, look, I saw the woman in
that
half.
is magician-centric.
Exactly.
Thank you. Now we clarify.
Okay.
Go on.
There we go. It's that whole thing. If the music hits and the magician's coming out and flamboyant gestures with his hands and the assistant's dressed very pretty, it's the assistant does all the work and then the magician gets all the clap. That's always the joke that's made. But there's clearly space for that because when you ask someone any member of the public what last magic show they saw, was probably something very similar to that, or that's the image of magic they have in their mind. So I think that should be altered. It's my personal opinion, but yeah, it exists.
Yeah. So you're saying there is space for it currently. There currently is room
there is
for
space.
it.
I don't like those styles of presentation. I wish they would be changed, but there clearly is space because they not only have been popular for the past 150 years, they're still popular today. We have shows like Masters of Illusions that are still going. They've been going for the past 30 or 40 years, right? And they're still going. They still exist. And those that type of show focuses very much on that type of presentation.
I believe it can be done tastefully. I can name a
Yes.
bunch of shows that are very magician-centric, which are wonderful shows. And just to maybe put a little bit of depth into the discussion, not only there is space, but there's a reason why there is space, is because we made the space. That space was created by people doing more and more stage magic in response to people thinking that other people like stage magic. It's offer and demand, right? If people figure that other people like stage magic, suddenly you have a lot of more stage magicians, which inspire new stage magicians, and eventually it carves out the niche. And if suddenly you start having a lot more audience-centric presentations, and it's bringing in crowds and better reactions, and a lot of people start doing it, well, it's going to carve its own space. So I don't think space sort of attributed, like, is there space? Well, for a matter of fact, yes, there is. Just turn on your TV, open YouTube, do whatever you want. But I think it's maybe an interesting discussion to sort of figure out how that space is allocated, how does it move, if that makes sense.
Real quick question, just to clarify something you said. It seems like you're like at least drawing a directly in proportion between a stage magic and magician-centric presentation. Is that something that you intentionally kind of created?
Absolutely, that's not what I said. I hope it didn't go through like that. But what I mean is, by the way, it's not only stage magic, but any niche or like anything just doesn't get space. It harvests its space, if that makes maybe a lot more sense. But no, although I think for a matter of fact, stage magic is very magician-centric today.
Okay.
But that did not come into my points.
Okay.
It's a really, really interesting question, and I'm really having a lot of fun just thinking about this. If you want to, just for fun, take the question literally, yes, there is room for stage magic because it simply exists now. Therefore, there is room for it.
Please stick to magician-centric, just as a toss-out, because I think if we get into if there's room for stage magic or not...
Oh, I'm sorry,
that's
did
a
I say
whole
stage
different-
magic? I meant magician-centric. I'm sorry,
No
I
worries,
slipped up
go
with
on,
my
go on.
words. I think magician-centric they do have room for that because it simply does exist now. And oh man, off the top of my head, I can't think of any examples, but in my heart, I feel like it can most definitely be done tastefully. I'm sure Alex can remind us of some great pieces, but it's almost the stereotypical magician, I guess, in white gloves and a top hat, on one hand can come across as extremely cringy, but on the other hand, I think there's a little percentage of there where it's almost relieving to see such a classic thing going there.
Interesting.
And if you can do it very, very tastefully, if you can do it in a way that is elegant, I think that's one of the things that is ascribed for that particular persona is elegance.
Oh,
I think if you could do it in such a way, it might work.
okay.
That type of stage magic that you guys are talking about right now with, the assistants and the lions and the tigers and making them vanish and, in the air, I think that's sadly at its core, it is simply entertainment. That's it. It is entertainment. And although for the art form, we don't like to see that type of entertainment, we don't like to see that type of magician-centric magic, but that's what people know, and that's what people want to see. Like I said, maybe for the art form, that type of magician-centric magic isn't the way to go. Maybe we like to see something a little bit more elegant, where, it's someone doing... linking rings, but it's about the rings linking, and it's a very elegant, maybe there's some music, I don't know.
Really quick, just a definitional thing that I want to clear up so that we can move forward is a piece about a story about me. So me telling a story from my past and illustrating it maybe through magic, I would not call that magician-centric.
Why not?
Again, very
why not?
counterintuitive
But
use
isn't
of
that
words,
about
but I will repeat my initial definition. To me, when the subtext or the punchline is "look what I can do," it is magician-centric. So I would maybe reframe it as egocentric. How about that? I think that really clarifies it. And if there is a story, to me, that's something other than the ego. And even if the story is about the magician, I think now it becomes about the story, and so that's not falling into the category that I'm talking about. If I could give you a super stereotypic example, I think Alex just hit it on the nail, where I have sawed this woman in half with my majestic powers, even if that's not explicitly said, and I will now proceed to put said woman back together because boom.
Okay,
Chris
that makes
Angel.
more sense.
So is this magician-centric? Can we steer this definition?
We can call it
into some
egocentric.
sort egocentric? I was gonna ask you, is it some sort of demonstration of skill? Or could it be interpreted as
I
such?
think demonstration of skill falls under there, which is what makes this topic, I think, a little more on the controversial and not a very black and white. Because we do see demonstrations of skill, again, like you all have pointed out, we see it done a lot. So I would say demonstration of skill. Let's use egocentric. I think I like that now that I say it. Let's go with that as a more
like that
clear word to define what we're looking at.
Let me expand, because we've been talking about stage magic so much. We're actually sort of mixing the ego magic, egocentrical magic, and stage magic. But not only, like, walk up in the castle, most close-up gallery shows are magician-centric.
Egocentric,
Most
100%.
parlor are magician-centric. Watch your YouTube video. Street magic is magician-centric. A very wide variety of what we have is magician-centric, and I believe there is not only space, but there is demand. So let me go back to the demand part. People are looking for extraordinaire. So going up, paying a ticket to the show to see someone do an impossible feat is something that is inherently attractive. So I think it is quite natural to have not only stage magic, any sort of magic. It was like formal and magician-centric. I think there's a reason for it. But I think that the notion of audience-centric magic is very misunderstood, not only by magicians, but also the audiences. And certainly a lot of audience-centric magic, and I'm calling audience-centric magic everything that isn't egocentrical, so a lot of it like story-focused, narrative-focused, and everything, can be mixed up with, phenomena that we don't really usually want to associate with magic. So we're talking about, occult and mind reading and stuff like that. And because all these audience-centric presentations and narratives and all of that are really on the edge sometimes, are really in gray zones, and really exploit the fact that a lot deeper emotionally, are a lot harder to perform properly without going off as the wrong thing. And for audiences, are a lot more intense to the point where it's not something you're looking at like an ambitious card. So I just wanted to put that into perspective, is that audiences absolutely do want to show business, right? But on the other hand, it's a lot harder to make something, to keep something under your control that's audience-centric by definition.
I didn't think about that before. Now it makes sense, because somebody going in, we talked about the public's perception of magic, but somebody going into a magic show thinking that they're going to see what they consider from their whole past experiences to be magic, and then seeing something that is much more audience-centric or much more artistic might be a little bit disorienting at first, maybe. And I had a question that I wrote down for Sanjeev, actually. Is this egocentric magic a default before artistry is inserted?
Just repeat that so that I can think about it.
Is this egocentric magic sort of a default, a quote unquote presentation? Essentially, basically, if you don't have anything around it.
Interesting. Okay, I think there's parts of that I like. So I'm going to answer that before handing it over to Connor, where I would use, here's another term that just hit me, magic-centric magic, where it's about the trick. I would use magic-centric magic and egocentric magic as synonymous, because here we're talking about subtext, and to me the subtext of both is look what I can do, even if the explicit outward text is different. The outward text might be and the rings link versus I link the rings, but to me the subtext is the same. And again, that might be oversimplifying, but discussions, you need to simplify a little. We need a model to work off of. And in that context, I would say egocentric magic is the default, because stripped of anything, I think egocentric magic, one thing it has over all other styles is efficiency. It is the most efficient, because you can say almost nothing. You can just do the trick. And although the subtext is egocentric, I think that is the most quickest to engage, quickest to capture attention, which might work best in context like street magic. You can't go to street magic just to invite someone off the road and then tell them a 3-minute story about your grandfather before getting into a piece. So I think context, which we're going to segue into once I hand it over to the others, I think that's another thing to think about. And so in context like street magic, egocentric magic is a great default because of how purely streamlined it is.
I don't really agree with the way you guys are talking about artistry in relationship to, I think it's completely independent of artistry. And in fact, I think artistry is definitely more present in magician-centric magic as opposed to context or narrative-focused magic. I mean, once again, because art, I mean, definition of art, etc. But most of the time, a lot of people would say it's an expression of self. And so if you're doing everything that you are away from that expression, what's going on, making it artistic is rare. So I just don't like saying it. Like, it makes it look very black and white. You know, on one side you have the artsy magician, audience-centric, which sounds very good. On the other side you have the egocentric. So I think all we're talking about is completely independent of artistry and quality of narrative.
Yes.
That does make sense. What I didn't with artistry, that makes sense, and that was probably the incorrect term. What I meant was, say you're just learning the handling for the first time, and the reason the magic happens is because I snap my fingers, because there's nothing else. That's just the handling.
I think that's not what we should be focusing on. We should be focusing on maybe more accomplished pieces, right?
I think for the sake of this discussion, moving forward, presentation is, I think, a word that I'm okay with. We've all expressed dislike with that word earlier, but I think it really covers the subset of things that we're looking at is the presentation. So I see, Matt, where you were coming from, but yeah, I'm going to distance this whole discussion from art because it's so complicated. It took two episodes to discuss.
Yeah. I think one thing we're forgetting to look at, or maybe just as a magician we forget to look at, is magic is quite literally just a feat of art, or a feat of astonishment, right? Where you are doing something that is not physically possible. At its core, no matter what type of magic you look at the end of the day, you're doing something that's... I see Alex shaking his head. Look, you can totally take it away after. At its core, magic is something that's most of the time impossible. And I remember one of my friends, I was just talking to him, and he randomly brought up this one trick I had done for him a long time ago. And he was just telling me, he's like, oh, I still can't figure out how you did it. And I was just thinking, wow. Like, that's what he sees. He sees it as a trick. And maybe it was the way I performed it. I don't know. But he still... I see Alex shaking his head again. No, but he still sees it as a trick rather than what we see it as. You know, Alex, go ahead, take it away.
No, just like in your said, magic is something you do that, and I'll stop you there. No, I think magic is something that I would like spontaneous. I would say that happens, but even that you might find some counter examples. I don't think you should define magic by something you do, and I think that's the very essence of what we're talking about. But indeed, it's something to have an intention of showing something and making something an atmosphere. It's something that's completely different to actually do it and make your audience perceive it and experience it as something that is narrative focused or audience-centric, or however you want to call it. So it's an extra dose of effort, practice, success, etc., etc. So yeah, definitely lots of things going on there.
Interesting. I think we're at the right point to broaden this discussion to context. And as a reminder to listeners mainly, the way we're using these definitions, Jerk's posts phrase it better than we could in a short amount of time. But magician-centric magic is egocentric magic, where the subtext is very close to look what I can do. And audience-centric magic, I'm going to repeat this, it doesn't have to be spectator as magician plots like that where you're directly involving a spectator. Audience-centric magic is more of a not egocentric magic. So everything but egocentric magic we are lumping together as audiocentric. Definitionally, Alex, do you have a caveat there?
Yeah, just because you mentioned it, I think it's good to mention that it's not because you're bringing someone up on stage, it's audience-centric. And I would even argue most of the time when people bring the audience on the stage,
yeah, that's true.
I believe it is very much egocentric.
Good. I love it. Let's broaden to context. We've already touched on it because now when we talk about audience so much, audiences are different in different contexts. So right off the bat, I would guess that in street magic, egocentric presentations would go across way better because of how streamlined and efficient they are, and you need to grab attention quickly. I think that's a big factor that's important in street magic. And even in a longer show, like an hour-long close-up show, for example, I think your audience cares about you. Your audience wants to know about you, and your audience is rooting for you. And so I think an egocentric piece somewhere in there, to me, is an incredibly, often necessary change of pace, change of texture that can really add a new dimension to a show by letting your audience kind of take a peek into how much work, how much effort you have put into this craft. I think, again, the issue where this topic comes from is how overused it is and how it's the default. So what do you guys think on context? Which context would you say certain types of presentations work best?
Well, I think street magic is something that's quite unexplored. You mentioned that most street performers just use egocentrical, but I think having just random, beautiful phenomena of magic happen sort of out of the blue and in a casual situation is probably one of the magical experiences someone could just walking down the street and something insane happens. Like, wait, what What?
My favorite type
Yeah.
of street magic, you'll have to help me with the words, is the when something happens, the distracted
Artist.
distracted
Ah,
artist.
yes.
The distracted artist.
Yes.
That's my favorite kind
Love it.
of street magic. The other day, I had the pleasure of being in the sun for 2 hours in line at the DMV. So I was just, that's my favorite type of things to do. I have no idea if anybody even saw me.
Maybe we should define it for our audiences.
Oh, absolutely. This is when I'm saying the distracted artist, I'm saying I'm doing a trick, but I'm not doing a trick for anybody, or I'm not calling attention to myself. I'm sitting in my corner doing my thing. The magic is happening. So, for example, I was in line at the DMV, and I was just playing around with my wallet with a levitation thing that I have, making my wallet levitate on the edge of my credit card. I have no idea if anybody saw me. Zero clue. But it's one of my favorite things to do.
Yeah, really quick. I think to me a key there is it often seems like the performer themselves is not paying any attention to what they're doing either. That's what takes it different from just someone who's saying patter and then doing a trick. This is a distracted artist. And for more info on that, there's a beautiful Jerks post on it that we'll link in our social media description of this episode.
The sort of distracted artist vibe skyrockets the humility meter of it. You
Interesting.
become so much more infinitely humble because of it, because versus the idea of look at me, look what I can do, versus simply doing and simply existing as if it's your natural state.
Yeah,
which
yeah.
people get to tell that story for the rest of their lives.
You know who does it really well, in my opinion? Michael Carbonaro.
Ah,
Like the Carbonaro effect.
Yeah.
I feel like sometimes like
That's true.
obviously you gotta be specific, but he does it really well where it's like, oh whoa, like I don't know how, like it's not me, like that was like I don't know what's happening, like I just, oh, you saw that was weird, right?
He doesn't tell people he's a magician.
I think the reveal of it kind of like undoes that, but it's a TV show, so
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
out of the context. But I love what you said about humility. Last closing point before we go to the break is it's really counterintuitive, but the people who become legends, like icons, they aren't there because they told other people about how they were legends. It's because they do something that they just do their thing, and other people are the ones commenting, which is why I think the distracted artist is working so well. And that's why it's
incredibly satisfying because you will hear
Yes.
gasps in the background, but do not look at them. Just do your thing.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe just before going to the break, we can talk about a couple effects maybe that would suit the distracted artist format, so that people can maybe reference, get ideas, or maybe like look into them.
Levitation.
Levitation.
Small
I
levitation.
don't mind saying names because we're saying positives about them. Gonzalo does Stasis, but I think it's
Yes.
the other brothers.
Yep.
Wonderful distracted artist effect. All the effects that make you build something. Sometimes you build something out of sugar, like a little statue of a bunny comes up and suddenly it's
Oh,
just
wow.
sugar. That's a really cool one.
Wow.
Conjunction.
Pretzels,
Conjunction when you fold the card and make like two solid linked rings out of them. Just leave it there. Wonderful effect. There's one and actually I saw about a straw. You sort of like pop open the wrapper, you pop it and you sort of fold it to yourself, and it becomes like a hyper realistic gorilla just for a second. Just look at it and then you just take it and
Hyper-realistic
throw away. And it's
gorilla?
just a wrapper.
Oh,
jeez.
That's really cool.
That's
wild.
What about like
So,
a
if-
Venom ring, the time stop?
I think that's a little more like attention.
It is.
because you
It's a
wouldn't-
bit more
It's
presentation.
a concentrated moment, right?
Yeah.
It's not an ongoing process.
So
where-
if anyone, for all our listeners, please look into that if you're interested in the topic.
Any sort of time stop would be kind of cool. I'm thinking
Gentlemen,
about it now.
it is time for our break. Time for us to breathe a little bit, and for me to tell all our listeners to go follow us on social media. We are on Instagram at Ungimmicked, and in the last episode, I had long thank yous to say, and I'll keep singing praises to Connor for all the work that he's put into our social media. So go check us out on Instagram at Ungimmicked. You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple, Google, and those are the three that I know, but we're on some others
Stitcher,
that I
everything
don't
else,
remember.
everything else,
We're also
yeah.
on YouTube, youtube.com/Ungimmicked. And you know that if you really want to support our work, you can see that we've been going for, this is episode 15. Correct me if I'm wrong.
14.
14.
15.
15.
15,
One of those.
Cut that out,
We've
Gonzalo.
lost.
Cut
We've done
that
so
out.
many. We've lost count.
You know what else we lost count of? We don't know why we're donating in this episode, and we don't know why we're donating in the last episode. For the Patreon!
I think Alex has been advocating to get rid of said section.
it's a little dumb. I mean, the message is clear. Like, if you guys want to support it and to make sure that we improve the quality of the podcast, donate. If you don't care as much as that, don't. Just stop it there, please. For the love of God, we don't need to say more.
All right.
Oh, it's okay, Grandpa.
No, we were cutting.
But yes, you can check us out on Patreon. That's patreon.com/ungimmicked. And let's move on to our breather crimp before we start our second half. And this week, I'm handing it to Connor McDonald.
Yeah. So you guys are gonna have to help me out on this because I'm actually in the process of reading them. But my recommendation is the Books of Wonder. I seriously, so far, I don't have words to describe it. It has everything in here to make you a better performer. I mean, so far the essays have been nothing but amazing. The tricks not only go into detail with the tricks, but it's also about the theory behind the tricks. I mean, what else do you guys have to say? I'm still reading them, so I haven't finished it, but hey, these are amazing.
I really like the way he applies like concepts. Like, for instance, for me, the biggest one was about misdirection, right? Everyone talks about misdirection every time we're magicians, right? And people are completely misunderstanding it on here. Well, Tommy Warren just like, you know what? Screw misdirection. How about we do direction and just makes an essay out of it? So he takes concepts that are very fundamental that we all think we know and really pinpoints what's important in them. That's what I really like in the Books of Wonder.
I haven't had the chance to read the Books of Wonder, but I am disappointed that both of you have talked about the book and haven't classified it as wonderful.
Yeah, I think they were above that, Gonzalo. And
you weren't.
I was not. I was not. I was that was right on my level.
And he wonders why. Yeah.
And that was right on your level. So.
Well, let's start our second half. Thank you, Connor, for recommending the Books of Wonder. Alex is now leaving the studio.
Oh my gosh!
But let's bring it back. Sanjeev, I'm gonna hand it back to you. Bring us into this second half.
Yes, sir. So, that was actually a really productive first half, and I think the kind of path we went down was basically that there has historically been space for magician-centric, egocentric presentations, and there always will be, and there are specific contexts where it's necessary, and so we should be making room for it. So I think this lends itself really well to a second half where how can egocentric presentations be done tastefully? Because regardless of whether they are necessary or not, and regardless of whether there's room for them or not, I think the way that they are done in a majority of cases is not good. It's not good. And I think that this podcast would not be accomplishing its purpose unless we posit solutions. We're not simply here to critique. So, how would you guys suggest is a path to go down to improve these egocentric presentations and be presenting them tastefully?
Well, I think the first step is to be in a context where people are ready to accept. Because one big thing with the egos is that egos clash. And, a lot of magicians, especially in their early years, have, stories about, egos clashing with spectators that did not like the fact of not knowing or not understanding or not being the star. And that's the big thing, is because at that moment you didn't realize it wasn't the right moment to place your ego there. And that's why usually the safest spot to do it, I believe, is in paid shows. If you have your face on a poster, there's your name, a time, and a price. If someone's paying that price to sit in the seat, I think you can safely assume that they're here to see you. So I think that might be a right moment to show yourself. But yeah, I think mostly try to question yourself and go, okay, is this a scenario where it's okay for me to talk about myself, my skills, or my magic?
I think one art form that we can look towards, and Sanjeev, we back and forth this a little bit, even before this the discussion began and we turned on the cameras. One art that's often associated to magic is juggling, and juggling is purely egocentric, if we're going with that word. I haven't seen a juggling performance that is not egocentric, and I think it would be very hard to make one, although very interesting. So any jugglers listening, if you have the creativity to do that, please do so.
Well, the references. It's probably been tried before.
It's probably been tried, and it didn't work out, and that's why I've never seen it. But
I don't know. I don't know if that's why you've never seen it. Maybe you just haven't seen it.
Maybe I haven't had a chance.
Damn.
But it's no, I don't think it's possible to make a non-egocentric juggling routine. And this is not me saying that juggling is bad. Juggling, I think, can only work if it's egocentric, or it can work best if it's egocentric. So why is that? And what can magic take from that? If they are two arts, almost sister arts, can we take something from there? Can we understand how does a juggler present his juggling? And can I present my magic in the same way in certain parts of my act?
Yeah. The juggling to me, or the message of juggling, is I practice this really difficult feat of coordination so you don't have to. So that you can essentially, so that you can enjoy it. I put so
Good
many
thing you
hours.
said it.
into
I was about to spend 10 years of my life practicing juggling.
No, you guys sort of, you know what I meant by that. Like
I'm not sure I know what you mean.
A juggler will go out and he'll basically he will exhibit what he has practiced to the world for people to enjoy the fruits of that labor together.
Well, but that audience-centric magic is still the same thing. It has that component.
Okay, I think I'll have to ask a question.
It's explicitly the result of practice.
Okay, I think I'll have to ask a question because I personally am not very familiar with the juggling world, so I want to know if you guys are. Have any of you seen a juggling performance that's longer than 10 minutes?
Yes.
Yeah.
What's the longest you've seen, Alex?
I think it must have hit like 12 or 13. It was a black.
Okay. Have you seen like near the length of most magic shows, close-up sets from 20 minutes to hour-long shows? Anything in that range? Do jugglers do that?
I have not seen it.
And I think to me, this might be a stretch, but I would say that that's testament to the fact that there's only so much egocentric an audience can take. And again, juggling is brilliant and beautiful in that time period. And this is not a diss on juggling. This is just saying that I'm guessing that's probably a reason for why we don't see a show that's 40 minutes straight of juggling. Because the subtext might be too similar throughout.
You see so many magic shows that are an hour straight of egocentric magic.
I would, again, depending on the magic, I would go as far as to call it bad. So I don't want to.
I would as well, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist or it's not successful, because there's so many acts in Vegas that are just that.
Really? Are you sure? Yes.
And we don't name names on this podcast, so
but I don't think
we'll
so.
Do that off air.
I think again, it's a matter of clarifying the definition of egocentric. For example, I think it is very different, and we cannot compare to assess a person like David Copperfield. I think people go to his show. They pay big money to see David Copperfield. They are there to see what he can do. And so just simply the context that he's creating presentations in is radically different from the context that the majority of amateur and even professional magicians will have to face through their career.
People don't go to a David Copperfield show to see a show. They go to a David Copperfield show to see David Copperfield.
Yeah. So I would watch David Copperfield see what I can do for an hour. I would watch that,
Yeah, but then I think Copperfield transcends a little
exactly,
bit
which is why I think we can't
He's
even touch on that. I don't think you can do egocentric magic that's look what I can do for a long time. Like even the first person I can think of who does like not many stories or narratives really is Danny De Ortiz, and he's a stunning performer. Because even there, to me, the narrative is the byplay between him and the spectator. It's not look what I can do. And even, again, in the second half of his show Unipersonal, you see him transition to telling stories about people that he pays homage to, his mentors, his idols, things like that. So even there, you see a texture change where it's not an hour and a half straight of egocentric magic.
Okay, I have a question.
Hit us.
That is, I'm going to say a point that is pretty general. I don't believe in it. I just want to say it. Okay. I think it could be possible to do 20 minutes of egocentric magic. And now here's the question. Could it be because the audience doesn't know that it's egocentric magic? They're focused, they came to see magic. So to them, their focus is the magic that's happening, maybe not so much the person that's doing it. And he's saying, oh, look at me. Obviously, there could be some exceptions, but I'm asking, do you think that could be a possibility?
I mean, I think 20 minutes is a small enough time range. I think to really explore this, we should be
Maybe
looking in the
40
40s. Yeah.
40 minutes. Could that be possible? Because they're focusing on the magic that's happening, not so much the magician that's doing the magic.
Well,
would it end up getting boring?
I'm not gonna lie. I don't know how to feel about what you guys have been talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I don't of course, there is a parallel we can draw between juggling and magic, but I don't think it goes as far as we're talking about. The problem with juggling involved to me as a spectator, so I'm talking as pure layman here. Well, juggling seems like you can bring a little bit of variety, but it's quickly redundant. And from my point of view, anyway, magic seems to be a lot more open. And I do not believe every single 1 hour egocentrical magic show is bad. And I think some are absolutely wonderful. And feels good to be on the non-critique side for once. No, seriously. But I just think that we evolve inside a bubble that is so big that I think is very possible and has been done a number of times to do long shows that are purely egocentrical magic.
Good caveat there. That is a big difference between juggling and magic. Is, I guess, the plot variety, right?
I mean, let's be real.
Juggling is juggling.
To an audience member, I believe I'm talking as an audience member here.
Mm-hmm.
Juggling balls or saws is essentially the same thing. One is significantly more dangerous and technical. Essentially the same thing. But on the other hand, let's take magic. If you take, any card, any number close up versus Miser's Dream on stage, is that like
so much variety.
anything looking alike?
That goes into the thing that we always talk about, that magic, just one word is not enough to describe everything that falls into it.
Man, jeez.
Yeah.
That I think 50% of our episodes one of the takeaways is we need to expand and get more names and more categories for what we talk about.
Do we though?
I think it's
I think we
important
should.
that we do.
I think we do. That's a different topic though, so I don't want to get there. Real quick, to head back on topic before we near the end of the episode, is one point Alex brought up to make egocentric presentations more tasteful is ensuring that they are in a context where your audience is willing to receive an egocentric presentation. What other ideas would you guys throw out that would help ensuring that it's tasteful and done either with the right quantity, the right quality?
Well, make sure not everything falls back on you. I mean, you can be mostly egocentrical, and the show might be essentially egocentrical. But you can make a lot of not only the storyline, but also the applause and the award and the emotion fall back on other things and other people. And that can be done, I believe, in the context of an purely egocentrical show. Really? But if you're looking specifically to just get the biggest applause at every single climax, people are probably going to hate you after 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. So even if you're going for something that's centered on you, which is completely fine, I repeat it, maybe try to see how you can bring variety, not into what you're doing, but the way people are reacting to you.
Yeah. Another way you can look at it is, who is your character? Is your character someone who's very egocentric? I mean, someone that I think does it really well is David Malik. I saw him perform in the juniors, and I thought, I even asked him, how do you get away with some of the things that you're saying? Because it was very egocentric. He's like, look at me, I'm the king. But I thought it went really good because he was emphasizing, he's like, hey, this is me. I am my ego.
And Handsome Jack.
So yeah, Handsome Jack. I think there's a right way to do it to make it very entertaining.
Wow. Okay. We have covered a lot of ground here. So to quickly summarize, I think first half we touched on how there has been room for magician-centric and egocentric presentations, and there always will be, because there are certain contexts where it just simply works the best, whether it's because of its efficiency or what it reveals about the performer. And in the second half, regarding how to present it tastefully, one good point I remember was think of context, think of the audience, make sure that they are willing to receive it. And another, I think we all kind of center around that idea of you do need ebb and flow. You need variety, and that's true in any show. Even in a stand-up comedy show, I think it's very dumbing down to call it just an hour of jokes, because it's really not. You need contrast. You need different types of jokes. You need different reactions, different flavors, different textures. And bringing that contrast in, maybe it is possible within an egocentric framework, but then that variety is going to need to be brought somewhere else. So as long as that variety, as long as that ebb and flow is still there, then it can be done. Yeah, great discussion, boys. Great discussion.
I think we'll close it very soon. Before we do, we always have our assembly. This week, sitting next to me, Alex Moreau.
Yes, I would like to take this opportunity to just offer to everyone listening to step to the other side of the mirror. And I'm assuming most people here that are listening are magicians. So I would suggest, well, first of all, try watching magic shows as a layman, which I know can be very hard. Now, the next step, and I believe what's probably the most efficient, is go watch shows. I'm talking theater, musicals, I'm talking exhibits, everything, and just try to be the audience and saying, okay, how egocentrical is this? Is this okay with me as an audience member? Am I not liking this? How is the atmosphere in the audience? Are people liking or not liking? So maybe stepping from the other side and trying to see things from an audience perspective will bring some perspective to your own performances.
Thank you, Alex. And before we close, the last 4 episodes have been recorded with just 4 frames on our Zoom because Alex has been next to me. Unfortunately, he's departing from California very soon.
No.
And he'll be leaving us, and he's embarking on a new journey very, very soon. So, preemptively, before your new life chapter begins, I have to do it. I have to do it. These are my 30 seconds to wish you the best in your future endeavors, and just don't forget about us.
I'm not going anywhere.
We love you, Alex.
That's
you.
my
We
big
wish you
thing.
the best
We
of
really
luck.
do love you.
So no, if you're listening, nothing's stopping. Like I'm just,
Nothing is stopping.
It's just gonna be less convenient to record because of time zones, but
Time
this thing is
zones.
going on, baby.
Oh yeah.
That's what we like to hear.
And maybe European
Gentlemen,
convention vlogs? Question mark.
Maybe. Who knows? Gentlemen, thank you so much for all being here. We were joined today by Alex Moreau, Connor McDonald, Matthew O'Neill, Sanjeev Vinod. My name is Gonçalo Souza. Thank you for listening.